She walked into court thinking she was untouchable, but just minutes later, she was in handcuffs. And the person who called her out, none other than Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. What happened next shocked the entire courtroom. And the nation. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The courtroom was packed. The walls seemed to hum with silent anticipation as reporters, legal aides, and political observers filled every seat, their eyes locked on the front of the chamber. The air was thick, not just with tension, but with something deeper, something rare, the feeling that history was about to be made. Then, boom! The sound echoed like a gunshot. Justice Clarence Thomas, typically composed and restrained on the bench, slammed his gavel with force and rose slightly in his seat. The murmuring of the courtroom came to a dead stop. Heads turned, pens froze mid-sentence, cameras clicked to attention. And then he said it. She is the worst attorney general this country has ever seen. His words sliced through the silence like a knife. They weren't whispered. They weren't part of a formal ruling. They were a thunderous, deliberate condemnation, aimed directly at Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida, who sat just 20 feet away, staring straight ahead. She didn't flinch at first. Not immediately. But as the weight of his words settled on the room like a heavy fog, her expression changed. The confident posture, the polished smirk, gone. In its place was a flicker of disbelief, and then perhaps fear. Across the courtroom, jaws dropped. Spectators blinked, stunned. Attorneys exchanged wide-eyed glances. Even members of the press, trained to remain neutral and detached, struggled to maintain composure. This wasn't just a courtroom exchange. It was a reckoning. A sudden fall from Grace Pam Bondi had once been seen as untouchable, a legal powerhouse, a political darling. Her rise through the ranks of Florida politics had been fast, dazzling, and sometimes controversial. During her tenure as Attorney General, she was frequently in the national spotlight, championing high-profile conservative causes and aligning herself with powerful figures, including former President Donald Trump. But Bondi's legacy had long been clouded by suspicion. Questions had swirled around her decision to drop an investigation into Trump University just days after receiving a $25,000 political donation from a Trump-affiliated foundation. Critics had raised red flags about her ethics, but nothing ever stuck, until now. And here she was, not behind the podium giving a press conference, not on TV delivering carefully rehearsed sound bites, but sitting on the witness stand, under federal investigation, and now publicly denounced by one of the highest judges in the land. Justice Clarence Thomas, who rarely speaks during proceedings and is known for his discretion, had just broken tradition in the most dramatic way possible. And if that wasn't shocking enough, what happened next sent the entire country into a frenzy. The handcuffs came next. As the courtroom still buzzed from the aftershock of Justice Thomas's words, two uniformed federal marshals began walking toward the front of the room. At first, it wasn't clear who they were approaching. Some assumed they were responding to a procedural issue, but then one of them pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The room gasped, again. Pam Bondi turned her head. Her eyes darted from side to side, her mouth slightly open as if to speak. But no words came. "Pamela Jo Bondi, you are under arrest on federal charges of obstruction of justice, perjury, and conspiracy," one marshal announced, reading from a small document. Bondi's voice finally returned, but it was no longer composed or confident. She muttered something inaudible, shook her head, and tried to stand. But the marshals were already lifting her arms behind her back. The cuffs clicked shut, and just like that, Pam Bondi, former top law enforcer of Florida, was being walked out of a courtroom, not as a hero or a witness, but as a suspect in custody. Gasps turned into murmurs. Cameras flashed furiously. Reporters scrambled to break the news first. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags like Pam Bondi arrest and justice served. The internet eruption. Within minutes, clips from inside the courtroom were circulating across the internet. News networks cut into live programming to report on the bombshell. Memes exploded. Public reaction was swift and fiery. Some hailed Justice Thomas as a hero for finally speaking truth to power. Others speculated whether his outburst was planned or purely emotional. But one thing was clear, something unprecedented had just happened. A Supreme Court justice publicly called out a former Attorney General. And minutes later, that AG was in handcuffs. The big question, why now? That's what everyone wants to know. Why did Justice Thomas speak out at that precise moment? What evidence had finally tipped the scales? Was this part of a larger investigation, or a warning to others in power? More details are still unfolding, and the full story behind this stunning fall from grace is far from over. But one thing's certain, justice was not just spoken. It was carried out, in real time, in front of the world. Pam Bondi wasn't just a name in Florida politics. For nearly a decade, she was a dominant force. As Florida's Attorney General from 2011 to 2019, Bondi rose swiftly through the ranks, presenting herself as a tough-on-crime, no-nonsense legal mind who wasn't afraid to stand her ground. With her polished presence, platinum blonde hair and sharp sound bites, she quickly became a favorite on conservative news networks and talk shows. To many in the Republican Party, she was more than just an attorney general. She was a rising political celebrity. She appeared at national conventions, stood alongside high-profile figures, and was even rumored at times to be a potential pick for higher office. But behind the carefully curated public image, a storm was brewing. The Trump University scandal. A turning point, one of the earliest cracks in Bondi's pristine political armor, appeared in 2013. At the time, her office was reportedly investigating complaints about Trump University, the now infamous for-profit education business owned by Donald Trump. Dozens of Florida residents had claimed they were defrauded by the program, alleging they were promised valuable real estate training and mentorship, but received little more than high-pressure upsells and broken promises. But suddenly, and quietly, the investigation disappeared. No charges were filed, no public explanation was given. Then, the bombshell. It was revealed that Bondi's political committee had received a $25,000 donation from a Trump-affiliated charity just days before the investigation was dropped. The optics were disastrous. Bondi denied any wrongdoing, saying the decision not to pursue Trump University had nothing to do with the donation. She claimed the donation was unrelated and refunded it later, but the damage was already done. Public watchdog groups pounced, calling for ethics investigations and labeling her decision-making as deeply compromised. To critics, it looked like a classic case of pay-to-play politics. And from that moment on, the nickname AG for hire started to stick. The growing shadow of controversy, as more scrutiny landed on Bondi, questions began piling up, and not just about Trump University. Reports surfaced about her close ties to corporate interests and wealthy political donors. She took heat for her participation in multi-state lawsuits that aligned more with partisan agendas than the direct interests of Floridians. Some accused her of political grandstanding, choosing flashy cases that garnered headlines over less glamorous but more urgent legal concerns. Her critics accused her of being more interested in TV appearances than courtroom victories. Indeed, Bondi became a regular guest on cable news networks, often using her platform to defend high-profile conservative causes and figures. Meanwhile, several small-scale investigations into her conduct seemed to disappear just as quickly as they appeared. Rumors circulated about internal efforts to bury complaints. Legal experts debated whether she had crossed ethical lines or simply operated in a morally gray area that the law had yet to catch up with. Either way, the narrative around her was changing. The public persona versus private power. Despite the swirling controversies, Pam Bondi remained composed in public. She smiled for cameras, delivered polished speeches, and continued to position herself as a warrior for conservative values. She was charismatic, articulate, and, to her supporters, an unshakable force against liberal overreach. But behind the scenes, many insiders claimed a different version of Bondi was at work. A version that was far more strategic, far more connected, and perhaps far more calculated than the public ever knew. She was known to work her network well, forging ties not just with politicians, but with power brokers, corporate leaders, and media insiders. Some of those connections would come under scrutiny later, as prosecutors began reviewing old cases and tracking patterns of interference, favoritism, and financial irregularities. Still, Bondi held firm. She weathered press storms. She avoided direct legal consequences. She left office in 2019 without ever being formally charged with any misconduct. To many, it seemed like she had pulled off the impossible, walking through scandal after scandal, without a scratch. But the past never stays buried. For years, it looked like Pam Bondi had escaped the long arm of accountability. But now, in light of her dramatic arrest and the shocking courtroom declaration from Justice Clarence Thomas, it seems the past has finally caught up to her. Sources close to federal investigators suggest that the Trump University case may have been just the tip of the iceberg. Financial records, communications logs, and confidential testimonies are reportedly being used to build a larger case, one that could tie together years of alleged corruption. What's becoming clear is that Bondi's carefully maintained image, the polished AG, the principled fighter, the rising star, was perhaps only part of the truth. The real story, it seems, was always hiding in the shadows. And now, that story is coming out. Fast forward to today, and the name Pam Bondi once again dominated headlines, not as a political commentator or power broker, but as a key figure in a federal ethics inquiry that has rocked the American legal community to its core. Bondi was summoned to provide special testimony in a closed-door hearing tied to a sweeping investigation involving former state attorneys, judges, and high-level officials. The allegations? Nothing short of explosive. Abuse of power, financial misconduct, and obstruction of justice during her two-term reign as Florida's Attorney General. The courtroom wasn't just any courtroom. It was a high-security federal review chamber buzzing with tension. Reporters weren't allowed inside, but sources close to the case say the energy was palpable, like everyone knew something big was about to happen. And then came the surprise that no one, not even Bondi herself, saw coming. A surprising figure. Steps in presiding over the ethics inquiry was none other than Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. While the move raised eyebrows initially, it wasn't without precedent. Thomas, despite his typically low-profile demeanor, had long been tapped for his expertise in judicial ethics and constitutional oversight. Most assumed he would remain impartial, clinical, and quiet, as is his reputation on the bench. The room expected Thomas to observe, perhaps ask a few clarifying questions, and then quietly exit. But what happened next blew those expectations out of the water. The breaking point in testimony. Bondi took the stand, cameras and live feeds remained off. Only notes from reporters and insider accounts made it to the public. But they painted a damning picture. From the start, Bondi appeared tense, speaking carefully but defensively. When questioned about her decision-making during certain investigations, particularly ones involving wealthy donors and politically connected corporations, she began to dodge questions. Her answers were vague, sometimes contradictory. At one point, she reportedly reversed a statement she had made under oath during a prior deposition. That's when murmurs started among the attending legal officials. Something wasn't adding up. One insider later revealed to reporters she was cornered. Her story wasn't adding up, and you could see it in her eyes. She knew it. Justice Thomas, initially silent, reportedly leaned forward, flipping through notes, listening intently. He began asking Bondi follow-up questions, pointed, precise, and direct. Each one seemed to undress a layer of her defense, leaving her exposed and unsure. She stammered, asked to repeat questions, and at times appeared visibly flustered. The gavel heard, round the country. Then came the moment that no one in the room would ever forget. Justice Thomas, known for rarely speaking during oral arguments, slammed his gavel on the desk with force. The room froze. He stared directly at Pam Bondi and, in a low but firm voice, delivered a line that would become instantly viral within hours. "You're the worst Attorney General this country has ever seen." Silence. Not a whisper. Not a breath. And then chaos. Gasps rippled through the room. Court aides and attorneys exchanged stunned looks. Bondi sat motionless, blinking, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't just criticism. It was a public rebuke from a sitting Supreme Court justice. The kind that can't be walked back. The kind that ends careers, but it wasn't over. The arrest that shook the nation. Just minutes later, as if on cue, the double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. 2 federal marshals, stone-faced and suited, stepped inside and made their way to the front. Bondi, still sitting, turned to look. Her expression changed from disbelief to panic. "Pamela Jo Bondi," one of the marshals announced, "you are under arrest on charges of obstruction of justice, perjury, and conspiracy to misuse public office." The courtroom erupted into whispers. Some attendees grabbed their phones. Bondi stood up shakily, tried to speak, but the marshals had already taken her arms. A moment later, the metallic click of handcuffs echoed across the chamber. The once powerful Attorney General, the woman who once stood beside presidents, was now being led out of court in shackles. Outside, news vans scrambled to get the scoop. Hashtags like "Bondi arrested" and "Justice served" immediately began trending. Legal analysts appeared on every major network, trying to unpack what had just happened. And across social media, reactions poured in. Shock, celebration, outrage, and everything in between. The fall of a legal titan in a matter of minutes. Pam Bondi had gone from witness to defendant, from power broker to public disgrace. And though her legal battles are just beginning, one thing is clear. The days of political protection and media polish are over. The courtroom wasn't just a place of testimony that day. It was the stage for a reckoning years in the making. And for many, Justice Thomas's final words still echo. "You're the worst AG this country has ever seen." A dramatic ending, or just the beginning. In the aftermath of her dramatic courtroom arrest, the question on everyone's mind was simple. What exactly is Pam Bondi being charged with? Just hours after her shocking takedown, complete with handcuffs and a rebuke, from Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, the U.S. Department of Justice released an official statement outlining the charges. And they are serious. In fact, legal experts are calling this one of the most significant indictments of a former Attorney General in modern U.S. history. Here's what we now know. The charges. A legal earthquake. Pam Bondi is facing a total of 4 federal indictments, each carrying potentially severe legal consequences. Obstruction of justice. Prosecutors allege that Bondi intentionally withheld evidence and manipulated internal investigations during her time in office, making it difficult for watchdog agencies and law enforcement to uncover misconduct. Misuse of public funds. According to financial audits, Bondi allegedly redirected taxpayer dollars for questionable travel, campaign-related expenses, and even private legal consultations designed to protect her own interests rather than those of the public. Perjury. During federal testimony. During multiple closed-door sessions and under sworn oath, Bondi reportedly made false or misleading statements, some of which were directly contradicted by hard evidence, including email records and staffer testimony. Interference in federal investigations. Perhaps most damning, Bondi is accused of actively intervening in federal probes that involved key political allies. This includes efforts to delay subpoenas, suppress witness cooperation, and blocked the release of sensitive case files. Federal prosecutors are reportedly building a timeline of communications that allegedly show Bondi not only knew about ongoing investigations, but took strategic steps to derail them for political gain. A legacy in question, Pam. Bondi's legacy as Florida's top legal officer has now been fundamentally rewritten. Once praised for her charisma and strong stance on law and order, she now stands accused of violating the very laws she was sworn to uphold. The Justice Department's statement didn't mince words. It emphasized that no one is above the law and described Bondi's actions as an egregious abuse of public trust executed at the highest levels of state authority. For legal analysts and ethics experts, the case sets a powerful precedent. It sends a message that high-ranking officials cannot hide behind their titles, and that even those with powerful connections are not immune from accountability. The internet erupts. As the news broke, so did the internet. Within minutes of the Gashin DOJ press release, Pam Bondi, her justice served, and Bondi indicted, started trending on social media platforms, especially on Twitter, now X, where users from across the political spectrum weighed in. On one side, critics and watchdogs celebrated the long-awaited reckoning. She thought she was untouchable. "Turns out, justice doesn't care who you are," one user tweeted. "Clarence Thomas just did what every honest American has been waiting for," said another. Memes, video clips, and edited footage of the arrest spread like wildfire, with some even turning the now famous quote, "You're the worst AG this country has ever seen," into audio clips, merch slogans, and TikTok soundbites. But the reactions weren't all celebratory. Some questioned why it took so long. Others speculated that Bondi's connections to major political figures had shielded her from consequences for years. Where were these investigations 5 years ago? One viral post read, "How many cases were buried to protect her?" Even more troubling, a number of users began asking whether Bondi acted alone, or whether there's a wider network of officials who may have enabled or even participated in the alleged misconduct. Political fallout begins. The case is already sending shockwaves through political circles, especially within the Florida Republican establishment. Several current and former state officials have either lawyered up or distanced themselves from Bondi in recent days. Insiders report that additional subpoenas are expected in the coming weeks, and a broader investigation into misconduct during Bondi's AG tenure is underway. At least 2 former staffers have reportedly flipped and agreed to cooperate with federal authorities. Meanwhile, campaign watchdogs are now revisiting Bondi's financial records from her time in office, particularly donations, PC activity, and any undisclosed financial relationships with political allies. A nation watches closely. For now, Pam Bondi remains in federal custody awaiting formal arraignment. Her legal team issued a brief statement claiming she is completely innocent and that the charges are politically motivated, though they did not provide further comment on the specific allegations. But as more documents and witness statements continue to emerge, it seems clear that this is only the beginning of a much larger story. What was once seen as a glittering political career now looks more like a cautionary tale, a reminder that no matter how powerful, no matter how well connected, no one escapes the truth forever. And with the nation watching, this courtroom drama is far from over. As of this moment, Pam Bondi remains behind bars, held without bail at a secure federal detention center in Washington, D.C. The decision to deny bail wasn't taken lightly, but the judge cited the seriousness of the charges, potential flight risk, and the integrity of pending investigations as reasons to keep her in custody until the arraignment hearing. Her legal team, notably quiet in the first few hours following her arrest, has since confirmed that she plans to fight all charges aggressively. According to sources close to her, Bondi is preparing for a legal war, determined to prove her innocence and, in their words, expose the political motivations behind this witch hunt. Whether that's a genuine legal strategy or media posturing remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: This isn't going away quietly. Justice Clarence Thomas, silent but firm, since his jaw-dropping outburst in court, the now iconic line, "You're the worst AG this country has ever seen." Justice Clarence Thomas has not issued any public statements. No interviews, no clarifications, no press conferences. But insiders close to the justice say he's not second-guessing himself. In fact, according to one aide, he said the truth had to be spoken no matter how uncomfortable. He felt the room needed to hear it. The country needed to hear it. Thomas, known for his generally reserved demeanor, has rarely taken such a bold public stance. For many legal scholars, this marked a dramatic shift, a powerful moment when judicial silence gave way to moral clarity. And for millions watching from home, it felt like the system was, for once, finally confronting its own. A national turning. This case isn't just about Pam Bondi. It's not even just about Clarence Thomas. It's about trust, power, and accountability. For years, critics have argued that high-ranking officials, especially those in legal or political roles, enjoy a kind of untouchable status, shielded by connections, campaign funds, and favorable media. But Bondi's arrest, and the growing web of charges around her, may signal that those days are over. "We're at a turning point," said a former federal prosecutor during a cable news segment. "This isn't just one official being held accountable. This is a message to every public servant in America. You're not above the law." Public reaction has been explosive. Some citizens are relieved, others outraged. But almost everyone agrees this story is far from over. More names, more bombshells. Coming? As the investigation deepens, speculation is growing that Bondi may not be the only one in the spotlight for long. Whispers inside the DOJ suggest that several other officials, lobbyists, and political donors are now under scrutiny due to financial trails and email records uncovered during the inquiry. Could there be more arrests? More trials? Maybe even a broader federal probe? At this point, nothing is off the table. Court documents expected to be unsealed soon could shed light on exactly how wide the misconduct spread, who helped cover it up, and what consequences still lie ahead. Some political analysts are even comparing this to Watergate-level fallout, a potential scandal that may reshape how Americans view ethics in public office for years to come. Final thoughts. Justice isn't optional, regardless of what happens next. Whether Bondi is found guilty or cleared, this case has already become a symbol of how power can corrupt, a symbol of how silence can be shattered, and most of all, a symbol that no badge, no title, no fame can protect someone from justice when the truth comes out. In the end, this isn't just a legal drama. It's a reminder to every voter, every citizen, and every official that accountability still matters. So now, as the dust settles and more facts emerge, we're left asking, will more names fall? Can Bondi clear her name? And will this case finally spark the reform so many have been demanding? Conclusion for your video. If this courtroom chaos shocked you, if seeing someone once so powerful walk out in handcuffs left you speechless, hit that like button and subscribe right now. We've got more breakdowns, more deep dives, and more truth bombs coming your way. What do you think? Was Justice Thomas right to break protocol and call her out so publicly? Is this true accountability, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're reading them all and featuring the best ones in our next video. And hey, if you want the real, unfiltered truth behind the biggest legal and political stories of our time, you know what to do. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update. The next twist in this story, it could drop any minute.